All right, MYB community, thank you so much for coming back. Episode number 183 of the Minding Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. Hope things are going marvelous in your day thus far, and you're ready for some great content that we're going to get from today's guest that I'm extremely excited for a myriad of reasons. And we're going to get into some subject matter today that is going to be very impactful. That's going to come from our guest, Josephine Atluri is our guest today. She is a meditation expert. She is the host, and MYB, I love our fellow podcast host. That we love to be able to support other podcasts. And so her podcast is called Responding to Life, living reflectively through a journey of health, fertility, and parenthood. Make sure you subscribe to that. When you get done listening to this episode, please go out to wherever you get your podcast and subscribe to the podcast. Leave a 5-star review on Apple and leave a comment. Leave a positive comment for Josephine and listen to episodes. And if you have questions or thoughts, share those with her. We always like to encourage, again, our fellow podcasters. But Josephine, thank you so much for taking time out today. I know there's a lot going on, but appreciate you joining here on the Minding Your Business podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Ron. I'm super excited to be here and sharing a discussion with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in listening to your podcast, I know again this is going to be tremendous. Yeah, you have a tremendous podcast. Let me tell you that, as someone who's been doing this for a while. We were talking a little bit offline, and I enjoy podcasts that when I get done listening to it, I feel like not just that I learned something, but there's something I can go apply.
Mm.
And I love that. And you kind of have a non kind of you don't really speak from theory. You speak from a lot of your experiences, and as do your guests, and so that's tremendous. And so definitely give props to you on that. That's it's a tremendous undertaking and a tremendous podcast for sure.
I appreciate your kind words, especially coming from yourself. You've been doing this for so long, so thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Josephine, let's dive in. For
Okay.
those that are not familiar with you, tell us, who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I essentially, my passion is to help people overcome adversity to find joy in their own lives. And I do that, as you mentioned, through teaching meditation, running infertility workshops, and through my podcast, Responding to Life, where essentially it started off with me sharing my journey of 13 years of trying to create my modern day family. And we ended up
Yeah.
doing that through non traditional methods of IVF, international adoption, and surrogacy to eventually create our family of 5 kids. And through that entire process, I learned so many lessons throughout it. And, after you go through something like that, you're called to share and to help others who are going through the same thing. And so all of these lessons I'm applying not just in, as you mentioned, as I share in my podcast, but also through these infertility mindfulness workshops, and also to all of my meditation clients, whether they're corporate clients or just single individuals or fertility specific meditation clients. All of the lessons learned really can be applied both through a fertility journey, but also in everyday life. And so, in a nutshell, that's what I am so passionate about doing. And that's what brought me here today to be a guest on your show.
Yeah, tremendous, Josephine. And as you share that, I was thinking as I was reading about you and then listening to the podcast, I said you started in the corporate world, and so
Yes.
talk about that. Talk about your transition through the corporate. Because listen, a lot of people are listening to this, and again, people have been impacted, as we both know, with unemployment, with closing of business, with furloughs, with all kinds of different things that we all are enduring and have different impacts on us. But I'd love to hear your story of transitioning out of the corporate world, or kind of through the corporate world, and the lessons you learned from that you're applying now in what you're doing.
Yep. Just like you, Ron, I've had I've had a myriad of lives, it seems like,
Yeah.
that I've lived, really. And,
Right.
the common thing in being able to do that is something that I try to teach my own kids, which is perseverance, grit, resilience. And those are the things that you need to step into something, not so much without fear, because there's always going to be reservations about trying something new, but just
Right.
being willing to go into it and
Yeah.
to give it a shot. Because if you don't give it a shot, you're never going to know. And if you fail and you learn from that, and you come out winning either
Yeah.
way. And so that's where my journey began with, I went into management consulting right
Yes.
after school. And I was trained in, or my background was supposed to be healthcare consulting, but it was the beginning of like the e-commerce boom. So I got thrown into helping startup companies, and which was great. I did that for a few years, and then I decided to just chuck it all and pursue this passion of cooking. So I went to cooking school while my
Yeah.
husband went to business school. That was my
Awesome.
opportunity to finally do it. And that was a fantastic experience on its own. And when I left it, I decided, I tried cooking for a little bit, catering and stuff. But then that business side of me came back, and I merged the two together.
Yeah.
So I created my own event planning business where I was versed in, creating a business, because I
Mm-hmm.
helped so many startups, but then
Right.
also coupling that with my experience now with cooking and catering, and I'm just really very organized. So it was like that was my jam. I was totally into it. I loved doing that for so many years. And then that's when that whole fertility journey came in, and I paused on that part of my life in order to
Yeah.
pursue this dream of becoming a mother. And that really took a long time. And because it was so, there's just this arduous journey, when I finally did have a child, I needed to be in that. And I needed
Yeah.
to really just experience that. So I took some time
Yeah.
off, and then all of a sudden I had kids, and I was itching to go back to work because I'm a
Right.
busybody. And so I went back into business, this time in the health industry, because one thing
Yeah.
that was consistent for me was always working out.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to pair the two together. That's one thing that I've always done, is, something that I'm good at and then something that I've had in my past. I'll put them together and start something different. And
Yes.
so here I took my business background and my love for fitness, and I started helping a company, a gym in Boston, with their business development. And through that, I really fell in love with this idea of helping people through their wellness. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I noticed as I was doing that for a couple of years was that, if you want to achieve total wellness, you have fitness, you have nutrition, but one thing you really need to address is your mind, and
Yes.
how you perceive things, how you look, your mindset of how you look at life. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what led me into meditation. And I
Yeah.
never thought that I could do it because I consider myself type A. As you can hear, I'm a busybody. I didn't think I could turn my mind off, but I tried it, and here I am today, now teaching other people to do it. And when I first started teaching, I went into the corporate side because of my
Mm-hmm.
background.
Right.
And I still do that today. I help people in corporations. I used to go into the companies, but now it's virtual, and help them with, I knew their everyday stressors. I knew what it was like to work in the corporate environment. So I was really
Right.
able to tailor those sessions to what they were going through. And then most recently, I thought, why not pair my meditation background with all of those things that I learned from my fertility journey? And so I'm also doing that now. And here we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah,
Many years
definitely.
later, many hats later.
And one of the things I love about when you share that, Josephine, is you use this term several times as you were sharing your background there and your story is the pairing and how you pair together your experiences with your passion, right? And then you create this lifestyle journey, and it's always something else that you shared is it was always designed every time you kind of reinvented yourself. It was always designed with someone else in mind, with helping others. And so you have this this unique kind of journey of kind of business, and then your lifestyle pieces, and then as you experience something in your life, you find a way to tie it to the past and then create a new kind of journey that helps others, which I think that's tremendously unique. Most people just kind of, I've said this, on several other podcasts. My analogy is sometimes people typecast themselves, kind of like
Mhm.
an actor or actress, where,
Right.
you play the good guy in a movie, and that's all you do, right? And
Yeah.
you never venture out to play the villain or to play, another character, right,
Right.
within a film. And so, you've done that kind of like you say all over. You've been able to, kind of again recreate these lanes for you in many different aspects. And so, something along that the line, and I want to get to the fertility piece of this because I shared with you offline. My wife and I had concerns kind of early on. We've been married now 13 years, and we've got three beautiful young girls. And we had what we thought would be obstacles.
Mhm.
We were fortunate it turned out not to be, but we were very concerned. And I think a lot of listeners can relate to that, or maybe enduring that now, or have endured that in the past. One thing that you said, on a podcast episode that stuck with me that I want to ask you, Josephine,
Mhm.
was the difference between responding and reacting. And I think
Mhm.
that's fit as we transition, to this topic. Could you explain that for our listeners? The difference between responding in a situation and then reacting.
Yes. No, that's a great question. And that's why that's something that I learned in my meditation training.
Yeah.
So when you respond to something, you're coming from a place of clarity. You have given yourself the opportunity to really pause and be reflective in how you're taking in the information, and then how you're able to react or respond to it in that situation through your words, through your emotions, and how you interact with that person or situation, versus reacting when you think of that, almost as if you're playing a sport. When you receive the ball, you have to react immediately. And
Right.
so those come from,
Yeah.
you know, emotions. You're being very
Yeah.
emotional and you're being super fast about it with very little thought. And because it's all stemming from experiences that you've had in the past,
Right.
and like connections in your mind and your body that you have forged over time, so that when that
Mm-hmm.
happens, you immediately go to that response. So an example
Yeah.
in real life, as you have daughters, young daughters, in order to, let's say one of them is having, say, a tantrum. We all know how that goes. And
Right. Right.
to respond versus to react. If you react, you may go to a situation that you already had with them and get frustrated because they still haven't gotten whatever lesson it is that you're trying to teach them. They themselves are reacting to the situation, but as in a child. And so
Right.
you may dismiss them, or you may say things that you've just said in the past, versus responding to that situation. You're mentally taking a step back and you're actively listening to what they're saying. And then in a calm way, you are able to really interact with them in a different level, because you're actually hearing what it is
Yeah.
that they need, and then providing some sort of interaction that will suit both of you in a better way. And so that's responding
Yeah.
versus reacting in the gist. That's a fantastic question. And that's how I came up with the title of that podcast, Responding to Life,
Yeah.
because we all can use every day. Even as a meditation teacher, we all can practice it. Even myself,
Yes.
we will always come upon situations where we'll have to make that choice. And really, that's what it comes down to, is making a choice. We all make it every day in our lives and in big pictures and in small little things. And it's about making that choice, but also preparing yourself to be able to make that choice.
Yeah. Yep, no doubt about it. And, it stuck with me because as someone that's been in leadership, and a lot of people listening to this are leaders in some form of way, whether, it's familial, at home, certainly, and then whether it's corporate and or in a business. And
Mm-hmm.
so, the ability to, and we've talked on other episodes about relational intelligence and how that's becoming so much more important nowadays than even just technical expertise and things like that. Josephine, is that, relational intelligence. And it spoke to that, when you said that, because, in grooming leaders, right, and inspiring leaders, one of the things, when I talk with, new leaders, right, that understanding of how to respond versus react, and
Mm-hmm.
the contrasting the two and the differences between the two, and how you can incorporate responding as a more effective way for leadership, right?
Absolutely.
And how it can lead to better long-term results than just reacting to things, like you say,
Correct.
which is rooted in emotion. It also spoke to me because I played sports at a fairly high level, particularly basketball. And so in basketball is a lot of read and react. There's not a ton of responding. There's not a lot of thinking. The best basketball players understand the rules and react to situations. So it's
Mm-hmm.
again, it's that read and react. There's a cause and effect. So like you said, that's a great comparison and analogy that you gave, Josephine. Of,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you receive the ball, now all eyes come on you, right? And so now you got to react. And as in sports, like in a lot of other areas, we're grossly insecure, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because like you said, there's you're reacting to what's going on right then. You're reacting to what's happened in the past, like you said, and then you're also, there's the fear factor of what may happen in the future,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I
Mm-hmm.
get the ball. Oh, somebody go take it from me. Who's
Right.
close? Who's closest to me? Where are my other teammates? And so all these
Right.
things are cycling through your mind, and the best players learn to react in that setting. Now off away from sports, like you said, one of the best ways is to respond to things.
Yep.
And to understand it holistically and respond in calmness
Yes.
versus that emotion. And so I just love that. And it stuck with me. I wanted to ask you about that. And so tying that to fertility, okay. And so you mentioned, you and your husband, grooming your family, and in some ways that can be, that certainly are non-traditional, but that require your ability to respond to be very sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us may tend to more react to those situations.
Right.
And so, talk about that journey and how, specifically, Josephine, how you and your husband work together. Because I imagine, obviously, you have to work together in a team effort. And then I'll, MYB, I'll relate this back to business here very nicely to you. But, talk about how you and your husband endured that together.
Mm-hmm.
Because I imagine, again, you had to be able to do that. You had to respond. But I imagine there were some obstacles along the way.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, if you would share that with us, because I think that'll help us all get a good frame of reference, and may help someone listening to this, Josephine, that's
Mm-hmm.
going through, a trying time, even during with all the unprecedented stuff that's going on in the country.
Right. I promise I will answer that question, but I just wanted to touch back on what you said about basketball
No, please,
because
please.
my son, and the reason I brought up the whole sports thing is just, I have a son who's 11
Yeah.
who plays basketball. He's just an average
Awesome.
basketball player. And you're right.
Awesome.
In the in the heat of it, he can only react. But
Mm-hmm.
during practice, now it's virtual with his
Yes.
coach. We do have those moments where it's everything is slowed down.
Yes.
That is when he gets to practice being uh, responsive, not
Yes.
reactive.
Exactly.
So
Very
we
true.
break it down in terms of, okay, someone just passed you the ball and now you're trying to shoot it, but you have this and such and this, and you're in this place. Let's be mindful. We've been really trying to incorporate mindfulness into his practice with basketball. Let's be mindful of where are you at in your body? Like, how are your feet positioned? And then when you do make that shot, like using everything within you, not just your arms, not just your feet, but your core and everything to really get it over there. And that
Yes.
translates into that whole idea of responding as a leader in a corporate environment, because you can practice this in these smaller instances and throughout your everyday interactions with people, so that when you do get into that bigger moment, say you're in an interview or you're speaking to your employees or just something that's a lot bigger and a lot more stressful, you
Hmm.
now have had that practice of being able to take a step back and evaluate the whole situation and be more responsive versus being reactive.
Yes.
And like you said, that serves just everyone in the situation so much better. And you become a more effective leader because you've shown that you are listening and that you're providing actual strategies for how to fix things, solutions that don't just work for you, but work for everyone in general.
Yeah, very
And
true. Very
yeah,
true. And let me jump in right there with you on Josephine. And I know we'll get back to the question, but
yeah.
that's powerful in what you said because I didn't even think about it that way till just now as you were saying that. Practice allows you to actually practice your response so that even when you're reacting to the game, the game
Mhm.
slows down, right? So
Yeah,
the better you,
right.
with like anything else, anything that you do, the game slows down.
Yeah.
And then as it slows down, you're able to then respond. So what happens is you first start doing something, right? And you take
Yep.
basketball in this example. When you first start playing, you're just reacting, and
Yep.
you're reacting, and then the better you get as you play more, you practice, like you mentioned. You get older, you get more comfortable in your abilities and your confidence on the floor, and so then the game gets slower, right? And
Mhm.
so then as the game slows down for you because you've been practicing your response,
Mhm.
right? It's just like public speaking or anything else, even like
Right.
what you and I do with podcasting, right?
Right.
Go back and listen to my first few episodes.
I don't want to listen to mine.
Yeah, if you, I mean, yours are tremendous. If you go back and listen to my first 3 or 4 episodes, oh my goodness, right? But
Uh-huh.
over time, like you say, practicing it and doing it and gaining a better sense of how to respond when you're live, yeah, slows things down for you and then allows even that reaction to then morph more into a response. And
Yeah.
so that's tremendous because as you were saying that, I was thinking through my career. I mean, you talked about your son 11. Of course, 1,000 years ago, I was 11, right?
Right.
And so I remember coming from 11, even up through now, how that's very true. And that spoke to my spirit there
Yeah, no, I had to bring that up because it's
tremendously.
so fresh right now with what we're doing with him. But you're right.
Yeah.
The practice is happening there is excuse me, you're creating these new neural pathways. And the
Yeah.
more you practice, the stronger it becomes, right? And so
Yeah.
that's why I'm a big advocate of, well, meditation, but
Yes.
doing it every day, because even if it's just for a few minutes, you're able to strengthen that connection from your mind and your body and that response, and it just becomes stronger and stronger, so that way it just becomes like a natural response then,
Hmm.
further down the line, and that's what you're always trying to achieve, whether it's meditation or basketball or anything. And
Yeah.
so, going back to your question with our fertility journey, I'll be honest, and I've said this before many times. I
Sure.
wish I did have meditation back then. I
Yeah.
didn't. I didn't have a good coping strategy back then, and that was a real shame. And why I'm so passionate about helping other people during this time, their time of creating their families, because it's so essential to have these strategies, these stress reduction strategies to incorporate during such an emotional time.
Yes.
And that's really, when you're in the thick of something so intertwined with emotion, it's really hard to step back
Mm-hmm.
and be more responsive, especially
Right.
with something like fertility, because it's so time sensitive. You
Yes.
always feel like the clock is ticking, and I don't have time to stop and evaluate my situation, evaluate how I'm feeling. But it's so essential. I really do coach that, in that even if it is just a couple minutes of your day, just to check in and see where you're
Yeah.
at, like not just physically, but also mentally,
Yeah.
because it really wears down on you. And so, my husband and I, at the very least, we had each other, and we didn't have support groups. We didn't have Instagram, which right now is such a great tool for many people going through
Yeah.
infertility. it's amazing now.
Yeah.
We went through this like almost 16 years ago. And so it was just us. We didn't have any friends going through it. And it's really hard to talk to people
Yeah.
when they don't know what you're going through, just like anything else.
Exactly.
If you've lost someone, are you going to talk to the person that hasn't lost anyone, or are you going to talk to the person that has? Well,
Right.
they'll get you, right? And so
Yeah.
we didn't have that. And we just kept going through the motions of this process. And so, in terms of, we were just reacting to each
Yeah.
situation. But finally, it did come to a point where, we had a loss of, when I finally did become pregnant, I lost the pregnancy at 17 weeks of twins. And that's when I really did have to just pause
Yeah.
and respond to the situation, because I had this time of grieving the losses that really forced me into this time of just reflection,
Yeah.
and just seeing really like where I was at with all of it. And that
Yeah.
time of caring for myself and caring for my husband's feelings, that is when we were really able to dig deep, because it's during those moments when you can really just evaluate. And that's what that whole responding is all about.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, is just being able to take a step back, evaluate things from afar, and then returning back to the situation with more clarity. And so when we did that first real response in our journey after that,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I called it.
Yeah.
And I said, I cannot do this anymore. If I'm being completely honest with myself, I just cannot do this anymore. And it's time to pivot. And so that's
Yeah.
when we pivoted to international adoption. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't have gotten there if I didn't stop and respond in that situation to what my reality was and what I could really handle. Otherwise,
Yeah.
after that, I imagine that I probably would have just kept going, which
Yeah.
many people just do, because you become so single focused on this end goal
Right.
that you don't stop to reevaluate. Like, you've changed. We all change in life. But
Exactly.
in moments like that, you're definitely changing. And from that person where you were when you first started, whether it's a fertility journey or starting a business, you have evolved to a different person, and your goals
Yes.
are different, and how you want to get to these new goals or the same goals, it's different, because you've had all these experiences to that stem from to make your new decisions. And so I'm a big believer and a big proponent, when I coach fertility mindfulness, is taking that pause. It
Yeah.
No one wants to do it. No one ever wants to do it, and I get it. But you always need to. It's just, it's like taking a timeout. I'm so into sports right now. It's just
Right. Right.
taking a timeout to just reevaluate and look at, like, what are the options? Like, what
Right.
can you do now? And so, that's how my husband approached it in the beginning. And then from there, then things changed, because then we had our son that we adopted, and then from there we were able to make better decisions of, okay, well, now we're coming from a place of more peace and happiness,
Mm-hmm.
so let's
Yes.
give it another try. We feel like we're more rested mentally, emotionally, physically, so let's try IVF one more time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was able to get pregnant with our middle twins and carry them successfully, which is
Yeah.
amazing. And then, the very last set of twins we had through a surrogate. We partnered with a surrogate who's our angel.
Yeah.
And that decision came through a lot of just evaluation over the years. Like, I had to be honest, I could not carry them again. But we had these frozen embryos. What were we going to do with them? So every year we had to make a decision. And, we're really blessed. We were able to finally, over some time, come to the decision to pursue surrogacy, even though it was really hard on me to let go of control and
Right.
feel bad about not being able to do it myself. And
Yeah.
so, that took a lot of moments of, again, pausing and being reflective with myself.
Yeah.
And so, those are the main lessons that I learned through that journey, which are, like I said in the beginning, so applicable to everything in life, even outside of
Yeah.
creating your family.
Absolutely, and one Josephine, definitely, shout out to you and your husband for what you were able to accomplish together in doing that and in growing your family, and also thank you for sharing that story. I heard there were some parallels that I heard, and when you were sharing that, and conversations my wife and I were having early on, and we are guilty of initially we reacted, right?
Yeah.
And we reacted emotionally. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of it's because of that fear and that insecurity that you described, and then that feeling that you mentioned of not being able to do it yourself. And
Yeah.
then, and I can imagine, of course, not being a woman, but I could just imagine, the hurt feeling of, maybe feeling less than, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The feeling of seeing other women that are able to do it, and
Yeah.
then maybe feeling inadequate or that sort of thing,
Yeah.
coming into play. And so it goes back to that theme we were talking about earlier, which was being able to respond and slow down, right? And then you embrace the tragedy of the loss,
Hmm.
right? To be able to bounce back and then build, a beautiful family. And so I think that's tremendous. And you, also what you alluded to is, that same pathway that often happens in business, right? Where, oftentimes I've had a failed business. Many that have are listening to this podcast, or currently, or whatnot, on whatever platform, you've experienced loss professionally as well.
Right.
Many have lost jobs. Well, we've had 47 million people or more that have lost a job. Some people have lost careers that they really enjoyed. And
Right.
so all those things kind of interrelate, and I appreciate kind of the best practice that you shared in that is how meditation, how connectivity, how having a holistic view and mindset, all those things allow you to be able to endure anything.
Hmm.
And that's a critical piece, MYB community, that I want everybody to take away from this is you can endure anything with the right mindset, right? And then, like you mentioned, surrounding yourself with the right people. You're exactly right. When you experience a loss in any kind of way, talking with people who haven't experienced that, or in some ways are doing very well in another realm, it's difficult to talk to those people versus someone who can relate. And so I love that you shared that. Josephine Atluri is our guest today here on episode 183 of the Minding Your Business podcast. You can actually connect with her, MYB, at jatlury.com. If you're watching this on the video portion, whether you're on YouTube or wherever you are, it's scrolling there at the bottom. But for those that are listening to the podcast, go to jatlury, that's JATLURI.com. Go there and you can connect with her there. Also, again, subscribe to the podcast. So, Josephine, meditation, right? Let's get into that a little bit. There would be some that think of meditation as just me sitting in a quiet room and trying not to think of anything, right? And I've got to imagine it's more than that, right? There's more to
Yes.
meditation than me just getting out of bed, go sitting in the chair, not being around any other human beings, and just kind of sitting there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes.
Right.
So, help us all understand the true purpose of meditation and how we can achieve it.
Yeah. So, I just want to just quickly touch upon what you said, which is
Yeah, please, please.
a common misconception with meditation is that we're not going to have any thoughts. And that is one thing that a lot of people who are, on the fence about doing meditation or perhaps trying it with me for the first time always say to me. And And that's not the case. You are going to have so many thoughts that come in. We have like thousands and thousands of thoughts that our mind
Yeah.
produces, and the idea that we stop it during meditation is unrealistic. So what's going to happen though is you're going to sit somewhere. It doesn't have to be anywhere fancy. You don't have to have like a zen corner. I used to do it between drop offs in my minivan. Would hop in the
Yeah.
back seat, would be at a parked meter, and just hope that I wouldn't I wouldn't be disturbed there.
Right.
um and so it can be anywhere. You can be in your office at your desk, and you're just closing your eyes just for a couple minutes. If you're new to it, just try a couple minutes. But
Yeah.
try and pair it with something that you've already had a set routine for. So, for example, like you said, waking up. You're waking up and then you're going to do something else. Maybe squeeze it into that other thing that you always do. So now there's a set time when you're going to do it, and it's already paired with
Yeah.
something that you've already set a routine for. So that's one way to help you set yourself up for success. The
Sure.
other one is keeping it short. And then another tip is to ask for help.
Yeah.
By asking for help, what I mean is to use an app, or to, follow someone who does meditation. For example, myself, I have several free meditation videos on my site, and you can start off that way.
Okay.
Because one thing about meditation is that it can seem so overwhelming, like, well, what am I supposed to do? But if you
Yeah.
have the benefit of some help, then you can be guided along the way. And then, so once you're actually in it, just remembering to be okay that thoughts are going to come in. And when you feel a thought come in, just you can acknowledge it, just say in your mind, okay, but then imagine yourself just sort of pushing it away and saying, I'll get to you at an appropriate time. And then
Yeah.
returning back to whatever your object of attention was. And usually it's your breath, like how you're breathing, you're witnessing that. Sometimes it can be a mantra, like a couple of words. It can be music, or it can be a visualization that someone's guiding you on, but
Mm.
just returning back to that. And then what you're going to find is it's going to be like this, like waves. If you're on a
Yeah.
podcast, you can't see my hands. It's
Right.
going to be waves where all of a sudden you've achieved stillness and silence, and you're in it, and it's amazing. And then you're like, oh yeah, I'm in it. But then that's a thought, and then so you've had a thought, and then your mind gets distracted to, oh my gosh, I have to send an email out to this person. And now you're really in thoughts, and then you remember, I'm thinking, and you need to get back to it, send it on its
Yeah.
way, and then get back. And so that's how it's going to be. It's going to be an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
So another tip is to be kind to yourself,
Hmm.
because just allowing it to be versus coming in with all these expectations. And again, that's another life lesson in business and meditation, whatever. You
Yeah.
go into things with so many expectations that you're bound to get disappointed because things aren't going the way you want. If you just set
Right.
some sort of like high level ideas of, intentions of, I'm going to feel calm, or I'm going to do this, then you reduce that frustration that you can have. So those are like my top tips for
Yeah.
how to begin meditation and sort of what to expect. And and I think that if you are able to do it once a day, then you're going to start to strengthen and build that pathway in your brain that will help you tap into all this inner calm that we all have inside, but much quicker. The next
Yeah.
time you get stressed out, the next time you get triggered by something with your business, with work, or what's happening in our country right now, and
Yeah.
illness and things like that, then you're able to get to it in a much faster way and
Yeah.
calm yourself down before you start to spiral into
Yeah,
negativity.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Josephine, in speaking with that, obviously, and you mentioned this, talk about today's time. So we're in a current, pandemic that has impacted people personally and professionally, right? You and I, we've talked about, with family and with children. And so one of the big things now is with school coming up here now that we're in August, and
Right.
looking at, preparing for how children will interact with schools and interact with the learning platforms and things like that, whether virtually or in person. Talk about that, just, from your perspective, how, we've we've entered these very unprecedented times, Josephine, um, and it's it's putting a lot of pressure and a lot of stress on people and on families. Because
Yep.
look, I've got friends that are having to make some real tough decisions and choices around. They have younger kids that can't really watch themselves or kind of do for themselves. They're
Right.
concerned about going back to the school. They're concerned about virtual learning, and all those things can just stress you out, right?
Right.
What are some things that you would say to people to help them deal with the stresses of just the one pandemic that we're dealing with, which is COVID-19. Not even talking about kind of racial and social injustice and that sort of thing. That's a even another stress point for many. But the pandemic of the virus and how it's
Yep.
impacting lives. Can you talk some about again, what are some things that we all can be doing to reduce that stress point on us?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So, one thing that I like to advise people with that they can do both in a meditation and outside of one is a breathing technique. Because right now we're finding ourselves in this constant state of what's called the fight or flight state, which is the stress response in our brain.
Mm-hmm.
And we are just constantly in it, no matter, there are just varying levels of degree of how we're feeling it in a day-to-day basis. But let's be honest, until we have a solution to it, we will just be in this state
Right.
because there's so many uncertainties that are related to it that we just can't control, and we don't know how to respond because there are no like guidelines for things on how to do this because it's so new. So because we're in this constant state of stress, our bodies are reacting to it. And with stress, things start to shut down,
Yeah.
such as our digestion and our immunity, because what's happening is that our body's trying to protect ourselves. So
Yes.
everything is going towards that, just the state of keeping ourselves alive. But the other part of our brain is this thing called rest and digest. And that's when we're in a state of calm, and they say rest and digest because one of the systems that shuts down is our digestive system.
Oh.
All of that goes to keeping ourselves alive. And so that
Yeah.
takes just so much work. So when you're in that state, you're just more calm and everything starts to work properly again within you, whether or not you realize that it wasn't working.
Yeah.
So the breath has this powerful ability to transmit to your brain that if you're breathing deeply and you've reduced your breath to a very slow level and you're taking deep belly breaths and things, that you're moving from this state of stress into a
Mm-hmm.
state of calm, whether or
Yeah.
not, like, you're still in it, life is still happening, it will be stressful, but
Right.
in that moment you're telling your brain, hey, I'm not so stressed, I'm not really in this fight or flight stage, I'm moving to becoming more relaxed and restful. And that's why, breathing is used for things like when you're pregnant, you're supposed to be doing certain types of breathing because they're trying to get you into that state of calm. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my number one tip for advising people during this time when everything is just beyond stressful, to find moments where you can take deep breaths.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be in a meditation. You can do it as, like, let's say you're on your phone and you're scrolling and you shouldn't be on it looking at like news or whatever or
Right.
social media, and you suddenly get triggered by a headline. I
Yeah.
find this with myself, I have I limit what I look at because I know my triggers and I know how I will like react to things.
Yeah.
And but every now and then one will squeeze in and here I am just scrolling and I get triggered. In that
Right.
instance, it's great to I'll find myself just taking a deep breath, and it will reset me back to just this baseline state. And nowadays, our baseline state is going to be very different from what it was pre pandemic.
Sure.
So we have to be comfortable with that. We have to be okay with the fact that this is existence that we are in now is just very different from what it was in the past. And you will reduce so much frustration if you just try to be in this moment versus comparing it to the past and thinking about the past. or projecting to the future where you can just go down a rabbit hole of things and negativity. Just being right here and focusing on your breath and what's in front of you is a great way to really curb an onset of anxiety.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and there's so many different ways to do it. One quick one for your listeners to do is just counting your breath. So if you count for, say, 4 seconds, then hold your breath for 4 seconds, then exhale for 4 seconds, and then pause again for 4 seconds. That's 16 seconds where you're able to really just focus on your breath, because when you're focused on one pattern, one thing that you're trying to do and count, you really can't think about that stressful thing that one of your coworkers
Yes.
sent to you. You really just can't if you're really counting. And then you can either keep it at that same count or maybe try to progress it. Now it's 5 seconds. And do how many ever cycles you need to feel yourself. You'll actually feel it. Your heart will stop pacing. You won't your blood pressure, it'll make you feel less hot. You usually get sweaty when you're really like stressed and upset. You'll just notice many things really slowing down in your body. And then you can go back to whatever it is, because now you're in a calmer state.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be a lot of that throughout this time, and just bringing yourself back to this baseline through breathing techniques, through a couple minutes of meditation every day, is a great way to help, all the other stuff that's happening with your
Yeah.
jobs and with school and with family. I mean, we all have to deal with all these uncertainties,
Right.
and that's just unavoidable, unfortunately, right now. But the one thing in our control, if you really need to control something, is just remember that you have your breath and your
Yes.
mindset. So controlling that breath and keeping yourself calm, and then using that mindset to try and stay positive. And one way I do that is through gratitude. I make my kids do it. I make my podcast guests do it. I ask for
Yeah.
gratitude, because if you can think of just one thing, all I'm asking for is just one thing
Hmm.
to say that you are grateful for, whether you say it out loud, you write it, or you email it to yourself, whatever, then in that moment, you can be positive about something. And
Yes.
it shifts your mind from whatever negative state it was to something positive. And I get it. It can be super hard to think of something positive, especially if you're in a fertility journey or you're in this pandemic. You
Right.
can have a hard time thinking of something, but you can always be thankful for the fact that you're alive, that you can take a deep breath, that that you had a morning coffee, or that you're listening to this podcast, just something. And
Right.
then again, you're training your brain, and over time you'll be able to come up with more, and you'll be able to keep into that like positive mindset.
Yep, definitely. Those are tremendous tips, Josephine, to say the least. And NYB community, I hope that you are jotting this down or go back and listen just to that part and get some tremendous tips on how to best manage our mindsets during these unprecedented times and then beyond, because we'll get through this all together, and then there'll be other times for us to consider. But thank you, Josephine, for that. That is tremendous. Yeah, and I'm gonna go back and listen to that myself, so I can. There's some things, nuggets I want to make sure I pick up on. Fun question for you, Josephine,
Hmm.
and I like to ask guests, and I love the reaction and some of the responses I get to this question. If I brought you, of course, me as the former banker, if I brought you $100 million cash, I pull up the Brinks truck to you guys' house, no strings attached. I'm feeling generous today, and I drop off $100 million in cash. What would you do with that and why?
When I love this question. It's just, I love this question. So I think you mentioned that you noted one of the underlying themes of all of the work that I've done is to help other people. And so
Yes.
whatever I do with this money will be used towards helping other people. So,
Mm-hmm.
I thought I would invest it in like different charities and things, but I think I would create like a foundation or an endowment where it allows the money to grow like perpetually.
Right. Of course.
going into the
Yeah.
whole banking side of it, so that it's not
Right.
just this flat money. And then like looking at different things that are close to my heart, such as, you know, children who are adopted, like children who aren't, so orphanages and things like that. Um, and then, illness has been a big part of my life, so contributing back to things associated with like pediatric cancers and things like that. And then social justice movements, and then now there are things with like helping women with grief and loss. So there would be so many different foundations that I would love
Right.
to contribute to, but then also to create my own where I could like get people's sort of ideas and what they're trying
Hmm.
to, almost like an incubator, and see like
Right.
what things that I would like to help people get moving, and
Yeah.
with a special focus on um, minorities and women. And so
Yes.
that's what I would do with it. It's just so
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I love
And
it.
you know what? What I love about your response, Josephine,
Uh-huh,
is we talked about kind of you have this fusion blend of your corporate life and
uh-huh.
then kind of beyond corporate life, and then you blended those in with your answer.
Oh, I did.
What you do with the cash? Yeah, so you talked about a mixture of investing, right,
Uh-huh.
to helping people, right? And then, fusing that all together with, kind of certain segment groups that sometimes are unappreciated or don't receive the same investment opportunities.
Right.
And talked about helping them. So it really, your answer really brought home a lot of what we've talked about here in this podcast,
Yeah.
which is tremendous. So
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, Josephine, because this has been tremendous conversation and tremendous dialogue, and you shared so much with us. If there were just one or two best practices that have worked for you personally that you think will work for someone listening to this podcast, and we talked about all the challenges that people are going through, as well as the successes that some people have experienced great success,
Mhm.
even since these times have come about, maybe even more so than before.
Mhm.
So either way, what are just one or two things that have personally worked for you from a best practice standpoint that you think will work for others listening?
Yeah. So we talked about it. One is to sort of pause on life
Yes.
and to to evaluate your situation, and doing this often, not just making
Yeah.
a one-time deal, but incorporating it overall in how you proceed with life and how you proceed with business. So that way you can return back to those situations in a more mindful and clear way,
Yeah.
and in a positive way as well. So definitely not being afraid to hit the pause button. That's one. And then the second would be, something through meditation, which was to just take some time out for yourself,
Yes.
to take care of yourself. And doing that through the power of a couple minutes of meditation, or incorporating a breathing technique, so that you can be the best version of yourself when you go back out into life, in
Yeah.
family life and business life. You are now operating from that higher level.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. No, great best practices to share, and they come from this conversation that I've had with Josephine Atluri. Josephine, again, this has been tremendous. I'm definitely going to be following you. Again, MYB, I encourage you go out and subscribe to the podcast, responding to life, living reflectively through a journey of health, fertility, and parenthood. Tremendous podcast. Make sure you go and subscribe to that. Do that today when you get done. Before you do anything else, do that. Josephine, we talked a little bit, kind of briefly, about the book that is going to be forthcoming. When can we expect the book, and how will we be able to, get our hands on it once it's available?
Yeah, I'm hoping towards the end of next year, and it will be all about self care as it ties into one's fertility journey and being
Yeah.
able to use mindfulness. Essentially, the things that I'm going through now in my fertility mindfulness workshops. I have another one on November 14th. So, if you're in it, then check it out, and you get meditation and mindfulness tips and how, go over them and how it applies to creating your family.
Yeah.
And once it's ready, it'll be up on the website. So
Yeah.
keep a lookout. And also on the website, you can, like I mentioned, try out some free video meditations just to get your feet wet and give it a shot.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. And so I'd love to have you back as
Oh,
the
I
book
love
is
it.
released to talk about it specifically
Yeah.
and that sort of thing and share that with the community. But everyone go to jatlury.com. That's JATLURI.com. Make sure you go there also. So once you subscribe to the podcast, then your next move is to go to the website and connect with Josephine. Let her know that you heard her right here on the Minding Your Business podcast. Josephine, listen, best wishes to you and your family, to you personally and professionally. This has been tremendous. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've learned a ton here in a short period of time. Some things that have challenged my critical thinking around some areas, and I love that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and best wishes to you. Hope to remain connected.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Ron. This was such a great conversation. I look
Yep,
forward to sharing.
excellent. Yep, excellent, excellent. So, thank you so much, and take care, and we'll talk soon.
Take care.
All right, bye bye. All right, so that was Josephine Atluri joining. Again, make sure you do that. jatlury.com. Check her out there and connect with her, and then definitely subscribe to the podcast. Tremendous dialogue, to say the least. And some things that we really need to consider is our mental mindset during these times, and then for all of you as parents or aspiring parents, or especially for you as women, definitely make sure to connect with Josephine. I can't imagine, her and her family, what they had to endure. And many of you have had to endure some obstacles and some hardships and things like that kind of throughout your walk. And so definitely, shout out to all of you who have had to endure that. And for those of you who have overcome those hardships and things like that. Man, it's tough, but it's great to know on the positive side that there's ways to not just cope with it, but to really endure past it to positivity. And that's what Josephine's all about and what she spoke to on today's episode number 183. So thank you all for your support for this podcast. Make sure you subscribe, 5 star wherever you get your pods, and certainly on Apple Podcasts. Definitely appreciate that as we continue to grow the audience here with the Minding Your Business podcast. Couple quick things as always. We are powered by the Binge Podcast Network. Brand your pod. I'd love to be your podcast partner if you're looking to launch your podcast. Josephine's done hers. I'm doing mine. Many others have started their podcast journey and their podcast platform. You can as well. So don't sit on your idea any longer. Go to brandyourpod.com. Schedule free consultation directly with me. I'd love to help you frame your idea for your platform and help you launch your platform, the equipment that you need, everything that you need to connect, to grow your podcast and then monetize it so that it's a profit center for you and not just solely an expense, if that's what you desire. So get with me on that. Also, brooksbrothersconsulting.com/leverage on August the 5th, which is tomorrow. But August the 5th, you can check out the live demo. If you happen to miss the demo, and this is for financial software for bankers, for real estate investors, and for business owners. Uh, if you miss it or you're not able to attend on August the 5th at noon Central Time, then please go and register. brooksbrothersconsulting.com/leverage. Go and register, and that way you can get a copy of the recording for the live demo. This is great financial software. It's balance the conversation between the borrower, whether it's the business owner or the real estate investor, and the lender or the banker. And so this is tremendous. It's a great company called Leverage. That's leveragecalc.com, where you can go there. Happy to be a partner in the business and whatnot. So listen, I'm going to get out of here. Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast. This has been episode number 183. Thanks again to Josephine Atluri for joining and providing just tremendous content. And make sure you go to jatluri.com. Go be great for yourself, for your family, and for your community.